Xylar fidgeted with the calibration dial, trying to focus on the lush green landscape swirling below. Earth, the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy, home to a species infamous for its savagery and unpredictable nature. He was a xeno-biologist of the Valtarian collective, a pacifist race known for caution, not for boldly venturing into a deathworlder den. But here he was, a lifetime of quiet research now hinging on the delicate instruments surrounding him. The observation pod hummed with barely contained energy, his mission to gain a preliminary understanding of human physiology before the diplomats attempted a formal first contact. It was exhilarating and utterly terrifying. "Reading stable, Xylar," chirped his assistant, Xylara. "Beginning non-invasive scan in 3-2. The hum intensified. A focused beam lanced down, meant only to gather data, harmless as starlight. On the screen, a human materialized, striding through dense foliage, oblivious to their scrutiny. He was a physically impressive specimen, broad-shouldered, a tool belt slung across his waist. A ranger, perhaps, or a guardian of their untamed wilderness. A jolt of static crackled, the image flickered, and the human figure warped. A shout of alarm barely left Xylar's throat before the screen went blank. His stomach plummeted. Every nightmare scenario his superiors had warned him about flashed through his mind. "Xylara, what happened? Damage report." She scrambled, her usually cheerful voice now tight. I don't know. Power surge, but the containment field is intact. No energy leakage, but the scanner, it's malfunctioning." They'd killed him. A deathworlder vaporized by an observation beam. The diplomats would disown him. The military faction back home would have his head. This was beyond catastrophic. "Prepare an apology transmission," Xylar choked out. "Immediate broadcast, all human communication channels. We must take responsibility." The galaxy would never forgive them for provoking humanity. He only hoped their punishment would be swift. Days bled into each other, a blur of dread and sleepless analysis. Xylar had become a pariah aboard his own research vessel. Most of the crew treated him with frosty distance, while the whispers of the more hawkish Valtarians promised retribution the moment they returned home. The guilt gnawed at him, his once precious data now a mockery. Xylara was his only solace, her youthful optimism a flickering candle against his despair. "Xylar, the humans must be planning something," she insisted each morning, handing him a bitter nutrient paste. Their silence, it's a tactic, a trap. Traps were all he could envision, warships cloaked amidst the stars, planet-killing weapons quietly aimed at the Valtarian homeworld. Yet their long-range sensors detected nothing. Not even heightened chatter among the humans, which their linguists had been furiously translating since the accident. One evening, as Xylar stared hollowly at the swirling blue marble of Earth, a jolt ran through the ship. Not an attack, but an incoming signal. He scrambled to the comm station, Xylara at his heels. The harsh, guttural noises of the human language filled the speakers, then a translation flickered onto the main display. It was crude, stilted, but the meaning pierced him like a spear. "Greetings, Valtarian ship," the text scrolled. "You owe explanation? Accident? What happened to Mike?" Mike? That must have been the human's name. "Send a response," Xylar rasped out. "Express our deepest remorse. A malfunction. It was a tragic accident." Hours later, another text transmission crawled onto the screen. "Mike is okay. Confused. Says he got zapped by lightning. You mean with sky lightning? Or you have lightning guns?" Sky lightning? Xylar's mind raced. "Xylara, recalibrate the scanners. There may be lingering energy signatures, atmospheric disruptions, anything." Hope, a fragile, unfamiliar flicker, bloomed in his chest. They hadn't killed a deathworlder after all. The relief was almost enough to drown out a new, far more unsettling fear. What kind of creature could survive what their instruments had done? Mike, it turned out, was a national park ranger in a vast stretch of protected wilderness called Yellowstone. He was also rapidly becoming a local celebrity. The news broadcasts the Valtarians monitored buzzed with blurry photos, eyewitness accounts, and increasingly outlandish theories surrounding his lightning strike. "They think he has superpowers now," Xylara squeaked, a mix of horror and delight in her voice. Some kind of energy manipulation. Xylar winced, imagining what those reports would do to their threat assessment back home. Yet he couldn't shake a sense of wonder. Their scanner malfunction had been an order of magnitude beyond anything resembling lightning, yet the human had endured. He zoomed in on an interview with Mike, the ranger looking equal parts sheepish and bewildered under the barrage of microphones. "I dunno folks, just felt like a real bad sunburn for a second, then I was on my butt seeing stars." The man shrugged, a hesitant grin spreading across his face. "Guess I got lucky." Lucky was an understatement. Images of Mike hiking back into the wilderness, seemingly unscathed, flooded the feeds. Xylar spent sleepless nights running simulations, trying to reconcile the delicate biology his textbooks taught him with the resilient reality on display. "It's not just toughness," he muttered to Lilara as they pored over medical scans of the ranger. "Look at the cellular regeneration, the skeletal density. This Mike is an exceptional specimen, but it hints at something fundamental about their species." They began intercepting more than just news. Human entertainment, a bewildering hodgepodge of violence and tenderness, unfolded on their screens. There were fictional tales of heroes enduring grievous wounds, historical records of horrific battles fought, and medical dramas filled with humans brought back from the brink of death. A grim understanding dawned. The Valtarians were a cautious species, sculpted by a gentle world. Humans, it seemed, were forged in an endless crucible. Panic rippled through the Valtarian ship as weeks passed, the silence from Earth punctuated only by the humans' baffling broadcasts and the relentless self-analysis forced upon them by Xylar. Some crew members found solace in routine, others in prayer, while a more aggressive faction openly clamored for a preemptive strike. "We must act before they do," Commander Rissa argued, her voice echoing the sentiments of many aboard. "Their resilience is a threat. We were fools to assume otherwise." Xylar, once an object of scorn, found himself an unlikely leader of a counter-movement. The scientific data, the sheer miracle of Mike's survival, ignited a sense of awe even amidst the terror. "Do you not see?" he pleaded to a skeptical council. "Their broadcasts show chaos, yes, but also compassion. Their medicine, crude as it is, speaks of a drive to heal. We have misjudged them." "Misjudged them, or given them time to prepare," Rissa spat back. The impasse led to a stalemate, the ship hanging in orbit, poised for war, yet paralyzed by the weight of the unknown. It was Lilara, of all people, who broke the deadlock. "Commander," she piped up one morning, "we're picking up a focus signal. Not from the surface, from Luna, their moon base." Xylar's hearts pounded. Was this it? The retaliatory strike finally mobilized. He rushed to the comm station, Rissa grimly at his side. The incoming message was brief, devoid of threats. To the Valtarians, it read, "Mike's fine. Weird readings got our science nerds curious. You want to talk about what the heck happened up there?" Relief washed over Xylar, quickly followed by a fresh surge of anxiety. It seemed the Deathworlders weren't as vengeful as feared, but scientific curiosity from a species like that, it could be just as dangerous. The debate surrounding a response was the fiercest Xylar had yet witnessed. The prospect of direct contact, of admitting their blunder to these formidable creatures, sent a chill down the collective spine of his people. Yet the alternative, to be branded as cowardly aggressors or worse, to invite further human scrutiny, seemed equally disastrous. Xylar spent a sleepless night crafting a transmission, agonizing over every word choice. To his surprise, Rissa joined him, her stern face creased with worry. "You understand them better than any of us now, Xylar," she admitted grudgingly, "if there's a chance to explain." Their combined efforts yielded a message emphasizing unintentional harm, a plea for dialogue underscored by an outpouring of the Valtarians' limited knowledge of human biology and history. A gamble, Xylar knew, but it was a gamble aimed at understanding, not appeasement. The agonizing wait was shorter this time. A response crackled back almost immediately. "Okay, space neighbors, you got our attention," the message scrolled, its casual tone a stark contrast to the Valtarian formality. "You up for some face to, appendage to appendage? "We're sending a shuttle your way. Don't freak out." The ship did, in fact, freak out. Yet, beneath it thrummed a current of anticipation no Valtarian present had experienced in their long, peaceful history. Xylar found himself caught in its riptide. When the sleek human shuttle pierced their sensor range, heading directly for a rendezvous with their vessel, he felt a jolt unlike any his instruments had caused, the jolt of anticipation for the unknown. The airlock hissed open, revealing not the hulking armored figures of Valtarian nightmares, but 3 humans, a woman in a crisp uniform, a man with a weathered face of someone who spent more time under the sun than in labs, and a smaller figure, a child, peering at them with wide, curious eyes. Xylar's translator struggled to capture the nuances of their speech, but their body language was surprisingly easy to parse. There was alertness, yes, but also a hesitant openness, a mirroring of the emotions swirling within the Valtarian delegation. "Captain Amelia Santos," the woman extended a hand. "This is Dr. Atticus Miller and our junior ambassador Lily." Lily stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Xylar, whose antennae quivered nervously. "Hi," she chirped, offering a small, brightly colored object. "It's a fidget spinner. For stress." Protocol shattered. Xylar trilled in surprise, her translator momentarily forgotten as she accepted the toy, spinning it with wide-eyed fascination. Xylar felt a surge of warmth. This was a peace offering, strange and unexpected, but an offering nonetheless. "Welcome aboard," he managed, his voice thick. "We have much to discuss." The meeting room was bathed in neutral tones to accommodate their differing visual spectrums. Xylar led them through the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing in the tense silence. Everything hung on this fragile encounter. Hours stretched into a blur of halting explanations, disbelieving stares, and hastily redrawn diagrams of human physiology. Atticus, a biologist, was the most vocal, his questions relentless, but sparked more by fascination than aggression. "Redundant organs, decentralized cellular control," he muttered, staring at the scans they'd beamed over. "You folks take evolutionary robustness to a whole new level." Captain Santos frowned at the screen, displaying Mike's post-lightning strike checkup. "And you're saying this is normal for our species?" "An exceptionally healthy specimen," Xylar confirmed. "But your remarkable resilience, it appears to be a defining characteristic." The weight of those words hung in the air. Xylar watched the humans exchange glances, something akin to wonder warring with a trace of resignation in their eyes. Talk stretched over the following days. There were flashes of tension, moments when ingrained Valtarian fears bubbled to the surface, old arguments about the deceptive nature of Deathworlders resurfaced. Yet, more often there was laughter, born of misunderstanding and the struggle to bridge vastly different concepts of existence. Lily was an unlikely star of the impromptu diplomacy. She roamed the ship's corridors flanked by an honor guard of delighted junior crew, her pockets filled with gifts from the Valtarians, glowing crystals, woven textiles that shifted subtly under different light sources. In turn, she shared candy, taught them origami, and fiercely debated the merits of Earth cartoons with any Valtarian willing to engage. Xylar found himself drawn to Atticus, their conversations ranging from the mechanics of the malformed beam to the grand sweep of human evolution. "We were shaped by struggle," Atticus admitted, tracing a scar on his sun-worn skin. "Against predators, against the elements, even against ourselves, it seems." "Is that why?" Xylar hesitated. "Why your stories are so filled with conflict, even when celebrating heroes?" Atticus nodded. "We understand struggle. It makes us strong, forges bonds. But it also leaves scars. We're a walking contradiction, Xylar, capable of such beauty and such terrible things." The admission shook Xylar. It was a vulnerability the Valtarians, for all their gentleness, rarely displayed. He thought back to the human broadcast tales of sacrifice and cruelty, humor born from hardship. They weren't one-sided creatures, these Deathworlders, but beings of staggering complexity. And that, strangely, was both more frightening and more comforting than their initial assumptions. News of the encounter reached the Valtarian homeworld, delivered with a mix of awe, caution, and a healthy dose of Xylar's newfound eloquence. To his surprise, the response was not outrage, but a ripple of fascination. Were these Deathworlders truly as formidable as feared? Were they, perhaps, something else entirely? The day the humans were to depart arrived with bittersweet swiftness. The Valtarian crew had grown accustomed to their presence, the ship abuzz with a mixture of anxiety and excitement it hadn't experienced in generations. Informal farewells were exchanged in the hallway's hesitant hugs, promises to keep in touch, last-minute exchanges of cherished baubles and scientific theories. On the observation deck, bathed in Earthlight, Xylar found himself face-to-face with Captain Santos. "We'll keep the lines of communication open," she said, her handshake surprisingly firm. "This has been enlightening. Let's call it a cautious first step." "Cautious indeed," Xylar agreed. "Your species, you have given us much to contemplate." Santos smiled, a hint of wryness in her eyes. "That's humans for you. Always overcomplicating things. Do your people a favor, teach them about peace, real peace. Would be nice for us to experience that sometime." He watched their shuttle descend, a flash of silver against the blue marble of Earth. It was done. They had not been exterminated, the ship wasn't reduced to space dust. Instead, they were left with a lingering echo of laughter and the humbling knowledge that the galaxy was far more wondrous and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Xylar found him there, hours later, staring out at the vast expanse. "We're going home," she said, voice trembling with a mix of relief and disappointment. "Home," Xylar echoed. It felt like a different place now, less safe, less predictable. "Gather the research team. We have much to rewrite." It was the start of a new era for Xylar, for his crew, perhaps for the entirety of the Valtarian collective. An era where peace would need to be redefined, where weakness and strength were not so easily categorized. And somewhere out there, under a familiar sun, walked Mike the Ranger, entirely unaware of the intergalactic shift his lightning strike had set in motion. The universe, Xylar suspected, was in for quite a surprise. The return home was not the triumphant parade Xylar had naively envisioned as a young scientist. It was a tense, subdued affair, met with a mixture of cautious awe, thinly veiled resentment, and in some corners outright panic. He was both a hero, the one who had talked down the Deathworlders, and a harbinger of doom, the one who had revealed his people's vulnerability. Debates raged across their world. Were the humans truly open to peaceful exchange, or was this an elaborate ruse, a ploy to lull the Valtarians into a false sense of security? More importantly, should they change the fundamental nature of their society? Xylar, once a bright-eyed idealist, found herself defending their hard-won knowledge. "We can't just pretend it didn't happen," she'd argued during a heated council session. "Ignoring the truth makes us weaker, not stronger." It was Xylar's data that proved to be the most divisive. His meticulous recordings of human physiology, their adaptability, the sheer tenacity ingrained in their biology. Some saw it as a wake-up call, a reason to bolster defenses, to begin a program of controlled evolution to make themselves less fragile. Others saw only despair. How could they, a gentle race of scholars, ever hope to match the single-minded resilience of the humans? The answers didn't come easily. What emerged were uneasy compromises, increased focus on defensive technologies, hesitant reforms within their long-stagnant military, and a surge of research programs desperately trying to understand just what made these humans so uniquely tenacious. Xylar found an uncomfortable place as a leader of this new movement. He taught, he mentored, and he relentlessly advocated for a path that avoided both blind fear and naive appeasement. It was an exhausting and often frustrating existence, but one fueled by the lingering memory of Atticus, his scarred face reflecting not just hardship, but the depth of experience his kind desperately needed to comprehend. News from Earth trickled in slowly. Humanity, it seemed, were preoccupied with their own internal affairs. There were no grand proclamations about galactic conquest, no ominous fleets materializing at the system's edge. In fact, most humans seemed to have moved on from the alien lightning incident entirely. Mike the Ranger went back to patrolling his park, an occasional blip in the news cycle as he rescued lost hikers or stumbled upon the odd poacher. This lack of focus, strangely, was almost more unsettling than overt aggression. To the Valtarians, strategizing over decades meant careful consideration and meticulous planning. Humans seemed to barrel from one crisis to the next with chaotic abandon, their attention span cosmically short. It begged the question, were they easily distracted, or simply powerful enough to handle multiple threats at once? One sweltering afternoon, a high-priority transmission scrambled the Valtarian Council. Xylar, now sporting streaks of silver among the downy covering of his head, rushed to join the assembly. It wasn't an attack, they were instantly assured, but something unexpected. "The humans," a communications officer stammered. "They've sent us a gift." The image flickered onto the main display. A gleaming metal sculpture, impossibly intricate, twisted and curved in ways that challenged Valtarian understanding of geometry. Beside it was a plaque, the human script painstakingly translated. "To the Valtarians from the people of Earth. A gesture of friendship, inspired by your resilience, and a reminder of the beauty that can be born from hardship." Silence fell over the council. Were the humans mocking them? Was this some sort of veiled challenge, a test of their ability to decode its hidden purpose? Xylar stepped forward, the memory of Lily's fidget spinner, a symbol of unexpected connection, vivid in his mind. "No," he said, his voice finding a strength he himself hadn't known he possessed. "I believe they're trying to understand us." Whispers erupted, turning into a heated debate that mirrored those from the days immediately after first contact. Yet now there was a new faction within the argument, those who saw the sculpture not as a threat or an insult, but as a reflection of their own fears, their own potential. The sculpture became a point of obsession, studied with an almost religious fervor. What were the humans trying to say? Was it mathematics, a hidden formula cloaked in artsy symbolism? Was it philosophy, a metaphor for the tangled relationship between their two species? Or perhaps, most unsettling of all, was it a simple gesture, offered without any agenda other than a tentative reach across the vast gulf between them? Xylar found himself drawn to Atticus's words more than ever. "We're a walking contradiction, capable of such beauty and such terrible things." It was the struggle inherent in human nature that made them resilient, unpredictable, and oddly compelling. The debates about the sculpture sparked a quiet revolution within Valtarian society. Their artists, once focused on soothing harmonies and pleasing symmetries, began experimenting with dissonant forms, with expressions that hinted at turmoil and a yearning for something beyond tranquility. Their scientists, spurred on by a grudging admiration of human adaptability, embarked on ambitious, if tightly controlled, genetic modification programs. Not to create super soldiers, but to bolster their species' frailties, to find strength without sacrificing their core identity. Even their military doctrine shifted, incorporating concepts of adaptability and rapid response gleaned from studying the haphazard brilliance of human conflict resolution. It was a path that made many deeply uneasy, yet the uneasy alternative was to remain static, frozen in the path of a potential juggernaut. And what of the humans themselves? They continued to be maddeningly enigmatic. Their news cycles still churned tales of violence and valor, but there were also broadcasts celebrating collaboration, teams of scientists from rival nations, uniting to tackle global-scale problems. They were, as the Valtarians were beginning to discover, a canvas painted in both blood and starlight. Xylar grew old. The soft down of his youth thinned further, his once bright eyes clouded with the wisdom and worry of a lifetime spent peering into the unknown. Yet his steps remained steady as he walked the halls of the new academy, a sprawling structure that would have seemed impossibly bold, even brash, to the Valtarian he'd once been. His students were a mix of bright-eyed youngsters and cautious veterans, the once stark divide between the scholar and the warrior blurred by the new reality they all inhabited. Today's lesson wasn't on biology or linguistics, but on something far more nebulous. "Diplomacy," Xylar began, his voice a rasp now, "in its truest sense, is not about appeasement, nor is it about domination. It's about understanding what frightens your counterpart, what drives them, and finding the common ground within that chaos." He gestured out the grand window at the sprawling city below, the geometric harmony of traditional Valtarian architecture, now punctuated by bolder lines, experimental structures that seemed to reach for the sky with newfound confidence. "We are changing," he continued, a hint of a smile creasing his lined face. "A process slower than the humans might like, more considered than they deem wise, perhaps. But change it is." A young cadet, antennae twitching with the mix of ambition and doubt so familiar to his younger self, raised a tentative hand. "But are we changing enough, Xylar? The humans, they are a storm. Can we truly weather it?" "Perhaps," Xylar admitted. "Or perhaps they will be the ones who need to change. Interaction. It's never a one-way process. We are shaping them, even as they shape us." Change. The word echoed in the silence that followed. It was a word the Valtarians had once shied away from, prizing stability and the comfort of the well-trodden path. Humans, it seemed, thrived on a diet of upheaval. The decades spun by. The humans remained a constant, if distant, presence on the galactic stage. There were tentative trade agreements, cautious scientific collaborations, even an incident where a Valtarian cruiser, redesigned with lessons painfully learned from studying human tactics, managed to outmaneuver a band of space pirates, a feat that earned them begrudging respect and a surge of dark humor across human entertainment channels. Valtarian society continued its transformation, a slow-motion revolution compared to the breakneck pace of their interstellar neighbors. Their artists embraced the dissonant and the abstract, their scientists pushed boundaries with a daring unseen in generations, and their leaders walked a tightrope between age-old pacifism and an unsettling necessity for strategic thinking. Xylar, now truly ancient, became a living archive, the repository of a before that the youngest of his kind could barely comprehend. He mentored, he lectured, and he wrote meticulously, ceaselessly writing down every detail of the encounter that had forever reshaped his world. Yet, at the heart of it, he remained a scholar driven by a nagging question. Was peaceful coexistence truly possible? Between a species forged in hardship and a species who had known only tranquility, was there enough common ground to build a lasting bridge? The answers refused to come. One day, his favorite student, a brilliant young researcher named Rill, found him slumped in his data-cluttered chambers. An outpouring of grief rippled through the academy and beyond. The old Valtarian who spoke with the Deathworlders, a tangible link to a pivotal moment in history, was gone. But what Xylar left behind was more potent than any diplomatic treaty. His writings became the cornerstone of a new field of study, not human studies but xeno-understanding. It taught that peace wasn't the absence of conflict, but the hard-won ability to navigate it when it inevitably arose. Generations passed on the Valtarian homeworld. They became less hesitant, more assertive, a subtly different people shaped by the echo of that first, terrifying encounter. The once mocked defensive programs now hummed as the quiet backbone of their security. Their scientists weren't just observers, but cautious innovators, pushing the limits of what had once been deemed acceptable. Their star charts cautiously expanded outward not with dreams of empire, but with the quiet determination of a people who had faced their fragility and chosen to endure. News from Earth continued to filter in. Humans, it seemed, were still maddeningly human. Wars flared and subsided, alliances shifted, and technological leaps occurred at a blistering pace that made even the most adaptable Valtarians' heads spin. Yet there were also stories of cooperation, of unexpected friendships blossoming between humans and other cautious races who had emerged from the shadows after witnessing the Valtarian stalemate with the Deathworlders. One evening, as the 3 moons of their world cast an ethereal glow upon the transformed capital city, Rill, now a respected elder in her own right, made a startling announcement. "We're ready," she declared to the assembly. Not with the youthful arrogance that had defined the hawks of Xylar's era, but with the resolute calm of someone who had spent a lifetime studying the lessons of the past. "Ready for what?" came a skeptical voice from the traditionalist faction, a faction that still clung to the dream of a return to blissful isolation. Rill smiled, a hint of Xylar's wryness in her expression. "Ready to send them a second gift." This one wasn't a sculpture, but a transmission beamed directly to Earth, bypassing official channels. It contained centuries of collected data on Valtarian biology, medicine, culture, all that Xylar had painstakingly gathered, and their scientists had relentlessly expanded upon. And within it, a message crafted with agonizing care. From the Valtarian collective to the people of Earth, we walk a different path, but a path undeniably altered by your existence. We share this knowledge freely, given with respect, and a measure of cautious hope that perhaps understanding our differences is a step closer to understanding how we might coexist in this vast and wondrous universe. The response was not immediate. Valtarians, after all, were accustomed to the slow burn of consideration, to responses mulled over for years. Humans seemed governed by a different rhythm entirely. The reply crackled into their communications hub a mere 10 days later. It wasn't from some stuffy scientific committee or a cautious governmental branch. To the Valtarians' collective shock, the message was beamed from a bustling public park on Earth. Yo, space neighbors, this is Mike. Ranger Mike, remember? Word is you guys got some info for us. Well, we're all ears. And hey, if you're ever in the neighborhood, Yellowstone is pretty sweet this time of year. The transmission cut off, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Scholars sputtered. Politicians turned a fascinating shade of purple. Security hardliners called for an immediate shutdown of the communications array. Yet, cutting through the uproar was a ripple of laughter, starting with Rill and spreading out like wildfire. It was so utterly, wonderfully human, the casual tone, the informal invitation. Disrespectful, tactically foolish, perhaps to the old ways of Valtarian thinking, but within it lay the echo of Lily's fidget spinner, of Atticus's scarred smile, a disarming openness that was their greatest strength, and perhaps their greatest gamble. The data transfer began a few days later. Teams of human scientists, the best and the brightest, pored over the information with a fervor that the Valtarians found both exhilarating and vaguely terrifying. What would these brilliant, unpredictable minds do with the knowledge of their strengths, their carefully guarded weaknesses? News broadcasts lit up with debates. Some warned of newfound Valtarian bioweapons aimed at humanity. Others spoke of a partnership that could revolutionize medicine, space travel, the very understanding of what it meant to be sentient in a universe teeming with the unknown. And somewhere in Yellowstone, Mike the Ranger probably shook his head at the fuss, fixed a faulty trail marker, and went right back to his day. The years that followed were a whirlwind. Not the grand galactic war some had predicted, but a messy, exhilarating, and sometimes deeply frustrating exchange of ideas, culture, and careful maneuvering. A team of Valtarian scientists, their delicate carapaces gleaming under the harsh alien sun, found themselves in a sprawling medical research facility on Earth. Their focus, studying how humans healed so rapidly, hoping to glean insights without compromising their own peaceful nature. There was gentle teasing, "You guys bruise if I breathe on you." A human researcher would exclaim, shared breakthroughs, and late-night debates on the ethics of pushing the boundaries of biological resilience. Human artists flocked to the Valtarian homeworld, initially seeking inspiration in the tranquil beauty, only to be seduced by the quiet revolution happening within their society. The discordant sculptures, the unsettling new forms of music, these became the obsession of Earth's creative minds, a reflection of the turmoil their own species carried within. Diplomatic channels buzzed, not just between Earth and the Valtarians, but with a dozen other fledgling space-faring races, all spurred into action by the fact that the terrifying Deathworlders were, for now at least, distracted by their gentle neighbors. Trade bloomed, alliances formed, and a sense of galactic community began to flicker, fragile, uncertain, but undeniably present. There were setbacks, of course. A miscommunication nearly sparked an armed conflict over mining rights on a barren asteroid. A well-meaning cultural exchange program inadvertently unleashed a particularly virulent and rather embarrassing human stomach bug within the delicate Valtarian biosphere. A group of overzealous human tourists on the Valtarian homeworld stumbled upon a sacred meditation site, mistaking it for a new form of performance art. Yet, through every misstep, there was learning. Humans gained a grudging respect for the subtle complexities of Valtarian communication, their deep-seated focus on the collective good. Valtarians began to grasp the human focus on the individual, their chaotic drive to innovate, to push back against the constraints of the universe itself. Neither species changed fundamentally. Humans were still loud, unpredictable, and brilliant in their contradictory ways. The Valtarians remained cautious, steeped in tradition, even as they carved out a bolder path. but a bridge was there, shakily built day by day, spanning the impossible gulf between them. Rill stood on the observation deck of the vast orbital station, a joint venture between the Valtarians and an alliance of 5 other emerging space-faring races. It was a marvel of engineering, of cooperation born from the strange, beautiful ripple effect that first terrifying encounter had wrought. Below, Earth gleamed, a testament to the relentless energy of its inhabitants. Rill felt old now, older than any Valtarian had a right to be, thanks to the medical knowledge gleaned from grudgingly shared human expertise. It was a strange sort of legacy, yet one she wore with quiet pride. Her communicator flashed. It was one of the younger scientists from the outpost on Earth, a perpetually harried but bright-eyed idealist named Tival. "Rill, you must see this." Tival's voice crackled, barely contained excitement, making the translation software stutter. "The humans. With the injuries, remember, they've done something remarkable." Within minutes, she was diving into research reports, her antennae twitching in a mix of fascination and a disbelieving thrill. The humans, never content with merely patching injuries, were experimenting, not with the brutal aim of creating supersoldiers, as some had feared, but with something far more subtle, more in tune with their unique nature. They were repurposing their regenerative abilities, guiding the healing process to enhance existing capabilities, rather than simply returning them to a baseline. A test subject, a veteran who had lost a limb in conflict, was regrowing it not with the perfection of the original, but with subtle alterations that granted him increased tactile sensitivity, optimized for his role as a communications specialist. It was ethically murky, pushing against boundaries Valtarians hadn't even considered. But it was also undeniably brilliant. Rill found herself picturing her students poring over the data, the endless debates it would ignite. This is what Xylar had envisioned, perhaps, all those years ago, an exchange that forced them to reevaluate everything they thought they knew. She drafted a message, carefully wording the request for more information, for access to the techniques. Her finger hovered over the send button. There would be an outcry from the traditionalists, of course. Yet, looking at the vibrant tapestry of the orbital station, the flicker of human ships alongside their own, she felt a familiar surge not of fear, but of exhilarating anticipation. The human response came, as expected, far faster than any Valtarian council would have deemed proper. It was typically blunt, and yet held a flicker of understanding for the unease it would likely cause. "Hey Valtarians, got your message. Yeah, it's kinda weird, right? Prosthetics are easier, you'd figure. But see, here's the thing about humans. We don't like feeling broken. So if we can fix it, truly fix it, maybe even make it a little bit better, well, gotta try, right? Data's yours, do with it what you will. And hey, if your docs want to drop by and see it firsthand, well, stranger things have happened." The debates that followed were the fiercest Rill had witnessed since the immediate aftermath of first contact. Some called it the ultimate betrayal of Valtarian values, a slippery slope towards blurring the line between healing and the weaponization of their own bodies. Others argued that it was the only way to ensure their place in a changing galaxy, a path that honored their principles while adapting to the harsh new reality. In the end, a compromise, as messy and dissatisfying as most human-inspired solutions tended to be, was reached. A strictly controlled program, limited to those who had already suffered debilitating injuries, was initiated. Valtarian scientists, alongside a handpicked and likely exasperated group of human advisors, began the painstaking work. The first successes were halting, the results unpredictable. Yet, with each breakthrough, with each Valtarian who regained lost functions in ways both familiar and subtly altered, a shift occurred. The program, initially seen as a grim necessity, evolved. Valtarian artists, once hesitant, found themselves drawn to the altered forms, finding within them tales of resilience, transformation, and an echo of the human spirit that had set them on this path. News of this filtered back to Earth, first in garbled reports, then in carefully translated articles penned by Valtarian philosophers. The reaction was a familiar mix to real now fascination, some horror, and a healthy dose of grudging respect. A new wave of broadcasts crackled to life, not focused on analyzing their gentle neighbors, but on introspection. If they can face their flaws, maybe it's time we took a hard look at our own. It was the beginning of another ripple effect, one that Rill suspected would reshape both their societies in ways they couldn't yet fathom. Centuries turned. Xylar's name faded into revered history, though the phrase, "an accidental mercy," remained, a reminder of the day everything changed. Mike the Ranger became a figure of folklore. His great-grandchildren, regaled with tales of his legendary sturdiness, rolled their eyes affectionately, only half believing the stories that had echoed down the generations. Humans and Valtarians were not allies in the traditional sense. Their core natures were simply too different. Yet they were bound together by a shared history, a grudging admiration, and the constant, often frustrating, always exhilarating challenge of understanding one another. Hybrid outposts bloomed at the fringes of known space. Daring Valtarian explorers, their exoskeletons subtly reinforced, joined brash human prospectors in the hunt for resources, their combined knowledge making them a formidable, if frequently bickering team. Joint artistic exhibitions became a bewildering sensation, Valtarian harmonies intertwined with frenetic human improvisation, somehow creating a discordant beauty that reflected both their origins. There were still missteps, conflicts born from misunderstanding rather than true malice. A poorly worded trade agreement here, an intercepted transmission misinterpreted their flares of tension that forced constant recalibration, relentless reminders that peace wasn't a destination, but a continuous, messy, glorious effort. Rill, ancient even by the enhanced lifespan her people now enjoyed, found herself in a position she could never have imagined for her young, idealistic self, an ambassador, not just to Earth, but to a dozen other species who saw the human-Valtarian relationship as a blueprint, a flawed and fascinating model for navigating a galaxy far more complex than anyone had dreamed. One luminous evening, as she addressed a gathering of diplomats, a delegation of towering insectoid beings among them, she found herself smiling. They asked about conflict resolution, about the delicate balance of compromise. Within her, the anxieties of a lifetime mingled with a stubborn, almost human, sense of hope. And so, she began to tell her story, starting with a Valtarian research vessel, a miscalibrated scanner, and a human named Mike who simply got a bit zapped. The tale stretched across space and time. There were no true endings, Rill knew, not when dealing with forces as restless as humans and as introspective as her own kind. The galaxy was a tapestry in constant flux, and their shared corner of it was no exception. Perhaps a war would erupt, old hatreds flaring, and forcing them back to the stark divide between Deathworlder and the vulnerable. Perhaps some human bioengineering experiment would go horribly wrong, unleashing a horror that made the Valtarians question the wisdom of ever looking outwards. Or maybe, just maybe, they would continue to surprise each other. A young Valtarian diplomat in training, a distant descendant of the cautious yet fierce Xylar, approached Rill after one particularly intense round of negotiations. "Will it ever get easier?" the young one asked, antennae drooping with a mix of awe and exhaustion. Rill thought of Xylar, wide-eyed with terror in the face of the unknown, of Atticus, his scarred face a testament to a lifetime of struggle, and of Lily offering a fidget spinner as a gesture of peace. She thought of Mike, probably fixing a leaky faucet somewhere back on Earth, blissfully unaware of his cosmic legacy. "Easier?" she chuckled, a sound surprisingly similar to the laughter that had first baffled her people all those years ago. "Child, the day it gets easy is the day we've well and truly lost our way." The young diplomat blinked, startled, but then a flicker of understanding sparked in their multifaceted eyes. They were of the new generation, the ones who knew no reality before the humans had barged their way into existence, forever altering the cautious rhythm of Valtarian life. Rill rested a comforting hand on the young diplomat's shoulder. It was time they learned what she had carried with her since that fateful day. Uncertainty wasn't a sign of failure, but the seed of possibility. Compromise wasn't weakness, but a different kind of strength. And sometimes the greatest leaps forward began with a stumble into the unknown. The galaxy, after all, was vast enough for both tranquility and a whole lot of beautiful, beautiful chaos.